By this point in life, you've probably seen how right and wrong can be flipped upside down. But sometimes a single honest sentence, from someone who seems to hold no power, is enough to make an entire system bow its head. Grayson Pierce, founder of the restaurant chain once praised as America's kindest brand, returned to a small branch he hadn't stepped foot in for nearly a decade. Not because of profits, but because something didn't feel right. And then he saw her again. Lena Hartley, a quiet former classmate, now a soft-spoken line server in the clattering kitchen. She didn't recognize him as the CEO. She only saw a man who looked like he was about to apply for a job. And whispered, "If you're thinking about working here, don't." A simple warning, but it became the spark for one of the most sweeping reforms the service industry had ever seen. Stay with us through this story, because some revolutions don't start with gunfire. They start when someone finally dares to speak the truth. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to update our latest videos. Early morning in Los Angeles still wore its lazy blanket of fog, reluctant to lift from the long, drowsy streets. Grayson Pierce parked a rented Lexus along a row of buildings in mid-city, right in front of a faded wooden sign that read, "Sage and Ember Bistro." Through the misted glass, he could already see a few early customers. Workers starting their day, familiar elderly locals, and uniformed staff weaving past one another in a rhythm that felt uneven. Grayson wasn't in disguise. He'd never thought he'd need one, not in this city, the place where he grew up, where the memory of running tables as a broke college student still clung vividly to his bones. Instead of his usual suit, he wore an unbuttoned Oxford shirt, a khaki jacket, and a pair of thin, non-prescription glasses. His hand tightened slightly on the door handle as he approached the entrance. Golden Hearth Kitchens, his brainchild, now had over 40 locations across the US. But this one, Sage and Ember Bistro, opened just over a year ago, had been troubling him. On paper, revenue looked fine, but in just 6 months, nearly half the staff had quit. HR reports arrived cold and clinical. School conflicts, personal stress, internal restructuring. Not a single word felt true, and then one of his advisors revealed that Calvin Drexler, the regional director, had intervened to delay 3 internal audits at this location. Grayson didn't wait any longer. He had to see it for himself. The glass door chimed with a soft ting as he stepped inside. The buttery scent of freshly baked pastries mingled with the rich, dark aroma of brewed coffee, hitting his senses like a warm memory. The cafe wasn't large, bathed in golden light from classic hanging lamps that cast a soft glow on long wooden tables. A familiar feeling crept over him, as if he had stepped back into an earlier version of himself. Just behind the bar, a young woman with her hair tied back adjusted the coffee machine. An apron printed with the Sage and Ember logo wrapped around her waist. Lena Hartley. He recognized her instantly, even after nearly 10 years. Grayson paused. She hadn't changed much. Those same resolute eyes, that practiced grace in the kitchen's tight space. But there was a weariness behind her movements that tightened something in his chest. Lena looked up and caught his eye, then gave a half-surprised, half-sardonic smile. Grayson Pierce? Well, I'll be damned. 10 years without a word, and now we meet again. In this mess. He returned her smile with a calm nod, playing the part of someone just passing through. Lena had no idea he was the CEO. To her, he was just an old acquaintance. Maybe someone about to apply for a job. If you're thinking about working here, She added, lowering her voice with a smirk. You should stay away from this place. It's not what it used to be. Grayson smiled. He didn't need to say a word, because in Lena's eyes he could already see it. The rot here wasn't in the furniture. And so the investigation began. Not as a CEO, but as an old friend, standing in the very kitchen he once dreamed of building with love, now decaying under someone else's hand. Don't forget to refill the cold brew later. It's almost gone, and it's only 9 a.m. Lena spoke briskly to a younger employee, her hands still wiping down the espresso machine. Grayson sat quietly at the bar, observing her. Gone was the spark she had during college. Every movement, efficient, precise, but no longer light. She operated like a machine, one trying hard not to break. They hadn't exchanged much conversation. Just a brief nod from her when she noticed him sitting there. As if two former classmates who once attended the same lectures, the same panels, were now crossing paths again, each with their own silent burdens. Grayson didn't rush to ask anything. He just sat, ordered a black espresso, which Lena prepared without needing to ask. Still drink it like this, right? No sugar, no ice. He gave a slight nod. She didn't meet his eyes, just turned away and wiped her hands with a dark cloth frayed at the edges. If you're really thinking of applying for an office job around here, you might want to think twice. This bistro, what's on the payroll is one thing. What happens during the shift is another. Grayson offered a faint smile, testing the waters. Too much pressure. Lena gave a wry smirk. Here, the hard-working ones burn out. The smooth talkers get the good shifts, the high-tip tables, the longer breaks. And anyone who doesn't belong to a camp gets the flexible rotation treatment. Her tone sharpened. One day I worked back-to-back morning shifts, but they only paid me for half a day. Software glitch, they said. I followed up, got an email saying it's being processed. It's been 3 weeks. She picked up Grayson's now empty espresso cup and poured him another half glass, still without looking at him. Sometimes I think this kitchen is like a game. The only difference is no one dares to publish the rules. Grayson stayed silent. He knew that feeling. He had risen from dish pit to founder, but never had he seen a kitchen with such quietly broken eyes. Lena glanced over at Brenda Knox, the shift manager, who was laughing with Tyler Harper in the far corner of the cafe. They said something, then both turned to look at Grayson. Lena's voice dropped low. Best you don't get too curious. Around here, silence is a survival skill. Then she turned away, shoulders squared, steps quick. But Grayson saw it clearly. In every motion, Lena was clinging to the last thread of self-respect inside a system hardened against morality. Amid the usual bustle of a weekend brunch rush, Grayson sat quietly, taking notes over his second cup of coffee. Warm light spilled across wooden tables, wiped down in haste. Everything looked ordinary if you didn't look too closely. But he knew the most dangerous problems often hid in the most familiar patterns. Lena walked past, carrying 3 plates of toasted sourdough topped with poached eggs and cured ham. A woman at one of the tables beamed, "Thank you, this looks amazing." Lena smiled, but her eyes didn't reflect the compliment. As she returned to the bar, she murmured just loud enough for Grayson to hear, "I've served 8 tables this morning. Still haven't been able to process a single payment. POS always shows access expired when it's my turn." Grayson frowned. "You don't have payment access. Only 2 people per shift are granted POS privileges. One's always Tyler." The other rotates. But it's never me. She refilled his water glass. Her voice was low but sharp. Tips are pooled, then evenly divided at the end of the month. But every time they do it, someone gets more. Someone else doesn't even know what they received. There's no official breakdown. No one dares ask. Grayson slowly stirred his coffee, trying to mask the anger rising inside him. Are the wages at least accurate? Lena exhaled and shook her head. Once my paycheck came up $40 short. When I asked, Brenda said it was a system error. Every time something's off, the answer's the same. It's been forwarded to Everform. But it's been weeks. No one's seen a cent. Everform Solutions. The name rang loud in Grayson's mind. He'd heard it many times. A payroll processing company personally contracted by Calvin Drexler, the regional director. Lena turned to him, her eyes nearly cold. If you came here to learn about the service industry, here's lesson number 1. The people who manipulate the payroll never wash dishes. And the ones who wash dishes, they're never asked what they think. Grayson didn't respond. He bowed his head as if reflecting, but in his mind there was only one clear sentence. I came here to clean this up, no matter who's behind it. Amid the soft clinking of cutlery and the faint scent of butter in the air, Grayson began to notice something strange about the rhythm at Sage and Ember Bistro. Not in the menu, but in how the staff were treated. On the right side of the cafe, Tyler Harper, with slicked-back hair and a smile rehearsed to perfection, was consistently assigned to the window seats, where customers were usually upscale professionals or well-dressed couples. Each time a group walked in, Brenda Knox, the shift manager, would casually but deliberately guide them toward that section. Lena, on the other hand, was sent to the tables near the restrooms or the patio. Hot, cramped areas usually filled with solo diners and low tips. Carlos Navarro, the morning line cook, was repeatedly given time-consuming prep work instead of being rotated fairly per kitchen policy. Grayson quietly observed. He saw that the contrast wasn't just about who got which table. It ran deeper into Brenda's entire demeanor. She flashed wide grins at Tyler after each table left, sometimes even high-fiving him like a teammate after a win. When one customer left a $20 cash tip, Tyler slipped it smoothly into his shirt pocket, bypassing the communal tip jar entirely. And no one said a word. No one dared. By contrast, when Lena politely asked for an extra glass of water for an elderly guest, Brenda glanced at the clock and snapped. Do you know how many seconds you just delayed the kitchen ticket? Stay focused. Lena didn't respond. She simply gripped the tray tighter, lips pressed shut. Grayson could feel it clearly now. This cafe wasn't a team. It was two quiet factions at war. One faction, Brenda, Tyler, and a handful of newly hired servers. Polished, quiet, always punctual, always in the right place. The other, Lena, Carlos, and a bartender named Taylor Quinn, whose hours had been slashed to just a few shifts a week. They wore their exhaustion openly, but still clung to their integrity. Grayson turned to Lena, who was wiping a nearby table. Seems like there's a hierarchy here, huh? Lena gave a wry smile. Here, if you know when to keep quiet and how to smile the right way, life gets a lot easier. Grayson said nothing. He looked across the cafe to the cashier counter, where Brenda and Tyler stood, laughing in low tones while Lena continued working non-stop. The chosen ones had claimed the stage. But now the spotlight was starting to shift. And Grayson, disillusioned but clear-eyed, began to see it plainly. This wasn't just a troubled branch. It was a carefully choreographed show. The morning shift ended in heavy silence. Customers had thinned out, but the kitchen still felt like a wire pulled taut. Brenda reviewed tickets from the brunch rush. Tyler leaned against the counter, texting while chewing gum. Lena quietly collected dirty glasses, and Carlos kept rinsing knives with a kind of invisible patience. Grayson left the bar, stepped outside the bistro, and slipped into a narrow side alley. He pulled out his personal phone, not the one the company used to monitor staff, and made a direct call to Evelyn Brooks, his most trusted executive assistant. Her voice answered after just 2 rings. "You're really there?" Grayson leaned against a brick wall, watching sunlight cut through a web of overhead wires. "I couldn't wait any longer. Sage and Ember is being controlled from the inside. Brenda's group is manipulating the shift schedules, controlling POS access. Tips are disappearing. Skilled staff are being pushed to the margins." Evelyn didn't ask for clarification. She understood immediately. "What do you need?" she asked crisply. "All digital tip distribution data for the Los Angeles branch, past 6 months. POS access logs, shift rosters, employee role classifications, pay scales by title. The more granular, the better." And Evelyn... Grayson paused for a beat. "I suspect Calvin Drexler is involved." Evelyn's tone dropped, no longer that of a typical assistant. "Are you certain?" "Not certain, but I feel it," Grayson said. "Brenda's running a shadow system, and Tyler has higher POS clearance than the stockroom manager. Someone gave them that access. And it wasn't just the branch manager." Evelyn drew a breath. "I'll contact Naomi Truitt in internal audit. If Calvin's really using a separate payroll vendor like you suspected, we'll find the trail." Grayson gave a small nod, though he knew she couldn't see him. "Thank you, and don't use internal email. Use the private channel." "Understood." The call ended. Grayson stood still for a moment, conflicted. He hadn't expected to investigate the very man he'd once handpicked as regional director. But what was happening to Lena, to Carlos, and likely hundreds of others? This was no oversight. When he returned to the bistro, Lena was wiping down the counter. She looked up at him, her eyes quietly asking, "You're back already?" Grayson simply smiled and said softly, "I think I'll be sticking around for a few more days. Looks like there's still a lot to learn." But inside, it was no longer about learning. It was war, a reckoning that would tear the mask off everything hidden beneath the silence. 3 days later, at 7 a.m., a secure email arrived from Naomi Truitt, head of internal audit for Golden Hearth Kitchens. Grayson opened his laptop in his hotel room, the blue glow of the screen illuminating a face growing harder with each new page of documents flashing before his eyes. The data didn't lie, but the truth it revealed made him want to scream. Digital tips at Sage and Ember over the past 6 months, $164,230. Amount actually received by frontline employees like Lena Hartley. Less than 11%. The majority of tip transactions were processed by just 4 individuals with POS access. Tyler Harper, 46%. Brenda Knox, 29%. One anonymous account, 17%. The rest marked as unidentified transactions. Time card data showed signs of manipulation as well. Employees like Carlos Navarro were logged as working fewer than 6 hours per day, even though internal cameras showed him staying almost 10 hours each shift. Naomi had attached snapshots of the personnel access matrix. Lena and Carlos had been tagged as temporary support, not eligible for digital tips, while Tyler and the so-called inner circle were classified as lead server, POS master. A final note appeared at the end of the report, typed personally by Naomi. This employee classification system does not exist in any official company policy. It is fabricated, and it only appears in locations managed under Calvin Drexler. Grayson exhaled deeply and closed his eyes for a moment. That silent rage beat against his chest like a war drum. The entire system had been twisted into a machine, one that drained decency and labor dry, all orchestrated by the very man Grayson once trusted to lead it. He called Evelyn Brooks immediately. Evelyn, Naomi just confirmed everything. The employee classification was forged. Tip distributions were systematically stolen. Calvin is behind it, and he's using Everform solutions to launder the funds. Evelyn's voice came sharp through the line. I've traced the origins of Everform. It's a shell company, formed just weeks before Calvin was promoted to oversee the Western region. The legal owner is a name registered in Panama, but the one actually running it is his wife. Grayson rose from his chair, staring out the window as the first rays of sunlight touched the faded rooftops of Los Angeles. Do we have enough? Not enough to take him to court yet, Evelyn replied, but enough to launch the first battle. Grayson turned back to the table and pulled up the internal map of the company's regional operations. At least 7 more branches sat under Calvin's control. And if this fraud model had been replicated, the stolen amount could be well beyond a few $100,000. I'm heading back to the bistro this afternoon, he said. I want to see it one more time with my own eyes. And this time, we'll let them walk straight into their own trap. That afternoon, in the top-floor office of the regional headquarters in Culver City, a closed-door meeting was underway. Calvin Drexler, Western Regional Director of Golden Hearth Kitchens, stood before a glass board littered with diagrams and employee codes. A tall man with slicked-back graying hair, he held a laser pointer in one hand, his voice thick with command and calculation. Sage and Ember is the final fracture point if we don't get ahead of this. I want these 2 removed within 48 hours, he said, pointing to 2 names, Lena Hartley and Carlos Navarro. At the corner of the table, Brenda Knox, the branch shift manager, lowered her head and spoke softly. Hartley's a bit sensitive, but there's no evidence she's sabotaged the system. We don't need evidence, Calvin replied, spinning a silver ring on his index finger. All we need is a technicality, uniform violation, tardiness, disruptive team behavior. You know what to do. Meanwhile, just 15 minutes away in a quiet cafe, Grayson was in a confidential meeting with Evelyn Brooks and Naomi Truitt. Naomi laid out an internal operations map across the wooden table, pointing to a series of locations on her tablet screen. We've confirmed it. All 9 branches under Calvin's region use a shadow payment system provided by Everform Solutions. Every location follows the same model. Digital tips are distributed only to select staff with POS access. The rest are labeled with the code OTMP-2, meaning ineligible. Evelyn nodded and added, we traced Everform's payment path. Each tip amount was split into sub-9,500 transactions, funneled through 3 shell companies in Texas, then routed to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, registered under the name Daria Drexler, Calvin's wife. Grayson exhaled slowly, drumming his fingers on the table. And he still holds full budget control for the region. Correct, Evelyn confirmed. Calvin filters every report from the branches before they reach headquarters. He buries complaints under internal resolution, then rewrites monthly data at will. The current HR oversight system is useless. Naomi looked up, her expression heavy. What we're seeing is a coordinated, sophisticated embezzlement scheme, carefully concealed for at least 18 months. Grayson stood still for a moment, then rose from his seat, eyes locked on the two women in front of him. I don't want another report. I want a strike. One hard enough that if he tries to retaliate, he'll expose everything himself. Evelyn asked, "Do you have a plan?" "I'm going back to Sage and Ember, but this time not to listen, to trap. They still think I'm just some former employee. They have no idea who they're really playing chess with." He paused, then said firmly, "And I want Calvin Drexler in front of a camera. Not just for embezzlement, but for deceiving the entire foundation of Golden Hearth from the inside out." As Grayson stepped out of the cafe, the Los Angeles sky glowed in burnt orange and deep red. A campaign was taking shape, and the man walking away with calm confidence was no longer a CEO behind a boardroom table, but a fuse ready to ignite. That evening, the crowd had begun to thin. Lena Hartley stood behind the counter, wiping the coffee grounds that had dusted the edges of the espresso machine. But her eyes kept drifting toward the far corner, where Grayson Pierce sat, just as he had all week, alone, calm and silently watching. He had returned to Sage and Ember 5 times in under a week, not just for breakfast, not just for coffee. He asked questions. He noticed things a regular customer would never think to care about. When Lena brought out his second glass of water that night, she couldn't hide the suspicion in her voice. "Grayson." "Yeah? What exactly are you doing here?" He looked up, slightly taken aback by the directness. Lena set the glass down, crossed her arms and tilted her head, as if trying to read through an invisible mask. "You keep coming back. This doesn't feel like someone who's just dropping by." Grayson smiled faintly, offering neither denial nor explanation. "I'm looking for something I used to love." "Love of the kitchen?" Lena squinted. "Or love of asking too many damn questions?" Grayson exhaled, his gaze still soft. "I care, that's all. You know I used to work in this world." "I remember," Lena nodded. "You were the guy who could work a 12-hour line shift and still have the energy to ask our professor about French lamination techniques." Then her voice dropped. "But this isn't a place for passion anymore." Grayson didn't speak. Lena glanced toward the kitchen, where Carlos Navarro quietly wiped down a skillet, and toward the bar, where Brenda Knox was laughing warmly with Tyler Harper. They're always smiling, always getting the good shifts, the big tables, people like me, like Carlos. If we don't smile at the right moment, we get stuck opening at 5 a.m. Grayson gave a small nod. There was no hiding the steel in his eyes now. "You're living in a system where kindness is treated as weakness," he said quietly, "and I hate that." Lena paused, slightly taken aback. "You talk like someone who could actually change something." "Maybe," he shrugged, voice light like the steam curling from his tea. "Sometimes all it takes is one person asking the right question." Lena was silent for a long moment. Then, barely above a whisper, almost to herself, she said, "You're asking a lot of questions, Grayson." She turned to leave. But just before stepping away, she paused, her back still to him. "And around here, people who ask too much don't last very long." Saturday morning. The Los Angeles air carried a faint trace of ocean breeze. Outside Sage and Ember Bistro, Grayson Pierce stood beside a black SUV with no company markings. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, stepping out in casual attire, But today there was no restraint in his eyes. Today he wasn't just observing. Today he was setting the trap. Naomi Truitt, internal auditor, appeared beside him with her usual composed demeanor. In her handbag, a palm-sized recording device, a hidden keychain camera that had helped crack 3 prior investigations. "We go in as customers," Naomi said quietly. "Every transaction will be recorded, audio and video. The tip will be processed using a Golden Hearth Kitchens internal loyalty card, linked to a traceable employee ID." Grayson nodded, holding the silver loyalty card, something no ordinary customer would have, issued only from corporate HQ. This card would be the key to exposing everything. 9:03 a.m. The bistro was beginning to fill. Lena Hartley moved swiftly between 2 family tables. Sweat clung to her brow, but her smile remained sharp and professional. When she saw Grayson and Naomi walk in, her eyes flickered. Surprise, mixed with subtle caution. "You again?" she murmured as Grayson approached the counter. "I'm starting to think you're not just here for the Benedict." Grayson smiled calmly. "Maybe I'm here for the server." Lena shook her head, barely suppressing a grin. She led them to a table near the corner. A perfect vantage point to monitor the cashier and POS terminal. The meal passed in quiet rhythm. Grayson and Naomi played the part of 2 old friends catching up. Lena served with precision, on pace, on script. But when Grayson asked for the check, the mood began to shift. "I'll be paying with a loyalty card," he said clearly, pulling out the silver card and placing it atop the receipt. Lena paused, eyeing it. "That's a special one. I've never seen anyone use one of these here." Before she could scan it, Tyler Harper, the male server always near the POS, swept in with a confident smile, inserting himself into the moment. "Let me help. A high-tier card like this deserves someone who knows the system." Grayson raised a hand calmly. "I'd prefer Lena handle it." Tyler kept smiling. "Wouldn't want to risk an error. System gets finicky on weekend mornings." And without waiting, he took the card and receipt, moving swiftly to the POS terminal. Naomi discreetly recorded every second, using the keychain cam attached to her bag strap. A few quick beeps, a familiar ding. Transaction complete. Tyler returned the receipt with a smirk. "Thanks for the generous $100 tip. Our staff will really appreciate that." Grayson gave a slight nod, but in his eyes there was ice-cold fire. 15 minutes later, inside the parked SUV at the corner, Naomi opened her laptop and synced the recording device. She pulled the transaction logs from the company's internal system. Confirmed, receipt number 22,354. Payment processed with loyalty card ID GHPX001. She typed in a few more commands. Tip, $100. Processed by POS account ID TH348, Tyler Harper. She turned the screen toward Grayson. Even though Lena completed the entire table's service, the system shows Tyler received the entire tip. Grayson gripped the armrest tightly. "Then it's over. Tomorrow, every mask comes off." Night fell quickly over Los Angeles that weekend. On the 12th floor of a hotel overlooking Wilshire Boulevard, Grayson Pierce stood by the window, his eyes tracing the blurred glow of city lights outside. In his hand, his phone displayed a stream of images and transaction logs recently pulled from Golden Hearth Kitchens' internal system. Naomi Truitt, still at her laptop, typed commands rapidly. She glanced up. There's no doubt now, all of this morning's transactions. Lena didn't handle a single one through the POS. Tyler intercepted everything. And Brenda, the assistant manager, was the one who approved the temporary POS access configuration. Grayson nodded, voice low and cold, and Calvin Drexler signed off on it. The system didn't break on its own. It was designed to fail, deliberately. Naomi rotated her screen, revealing a 6-month tip flow analysis. Total tips funneled through Tyler Harper's POS, over $46,000. Lena, Carlos, and 4 other staff members each lost nearly $7,000 on average. A soft ping sounded from Grayson's phone. A message from Evelyn Brooks, his trusted assistant at HQ. They're getting suspicious. Lena's POS access was just revoked. Her shifts for next week have been wiped from the schedule. Brenda's prepping a termination file. They know someone's digging. Grayson read it silently. Gone was the warmth of a familiar friend or the calm of a corporate executive. His eyes sharpened, like a blade ready to cut through the mask that had long covered his own company. His voice held no hesitation. "We act tomorrow morning." Naomi looked up. "Are you sure? If we wait 48 more hours, we'll have everything, even Everform solutions." Grayson shook his head. "If Lena's fired Monday morning, it all collapses. Everyone else will freeze. No one will dare speak again." He stepped to the table, retrieving a thick binder. Its cover stamped and secured, filled with evidence gathered by Naomi's audit team. The label read, "Los Angeles Branch, Tip Fraud and Shift System Violations Report. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Gather the entire staff. I'll walk in as CEO." Naomi nodded slowly. "And Lena?" Grayson didn't flinch. "She'll be seated front row." Just then, his phone buzzed again. An unknown number. He answered. It was Carlos Navarro, the quiet line cook Grayson had silently watched for days. "I don't know who you are, but Lena's in trouble. There's talk she's getting canned Monday. And I saw Tyler printing something near the office printer. Looked like a fake warning letter." Grayson's voice turned firm. "Carlos, are you willing to step forward?" Silence. Then Carlos spoke, his voice hoarse but resolute. "I'm tired of being quiet. Just tell me what to do." That night, in the hush of a dim hotel room, under the soft gold of a desk lamp, Grayson hand-wrote a short letter. Not for the company, not for the press, but for people like Lena, Carlos, and the hundreds of workers silenced by a broken system. This company was never built by me alone. It was built by sweat, silent endurance, and the unseen smiles of thousands behind the kitchen line. I can't just stand by any longer. He folded the letter and slipped it into the pocket of his suit jacket. Tomorrow, when he walked into Sage and Ember Bistro, he would no longer be just an old friend. He would be Grayson Pierce, the founder, and everything would change. Forever. 9 a.m. Sage and Ember Bistro didn't feel like a typical Sunday morning. The bar music was off, the kitchen burners were silent, and guests had been informed the restaurant would open an hour late. All staff were summoned to the main dining area. No one knew what was going on, only that a group of sharply dressed individuals had arrived early, carrying laptops, a projector, and an atmosphere as cold as a courtroom. Lena Hartley walked in last. She was invited to sit in the front row, though her heart was filled with unease. Carlos Navarro caught her eye and gave her a look that asked, "You okay?" She nodded faintly. Since the night before, everything had grown uncertain. Her name had been erased from the schedule, her internal account was locked, and whispers swirled that she'd be quietly removed. Toward the back, Brenda Knox, the branch manager, sat hunched beside Tyler Harper. The two whispered nervously, trying to maintain composure. Suddenly, the door to the kitchen opened. A man walked out, no longer in a rolled-up shirt or casual khaki jacket. Today he wore a black suit and a deep navy tie. No one said a word, but glances began to flicker across the room. Grayson Pierce stepped forward. Lena froze, her eyes widened. "No, it can't be," she whispered. The room fell into stunned silence. Grayson looked around at the staff, pausing on Lena. Then in a firm, resonant voice, "I'm Grayson Pierce, founder of Golden Hearth Kitchens." A wave of gasps spread through the room. Several people nearly shot up from their chairs. Tyler stammered. Brenda stiffened, her hands clenched in her lap. Grayson raised a hand for quiet. "Please, silence. I'm not here to make an announcement. I'm here to apologize. And to make things right." He turned to Naomi Truitt, already stationed beside the projector. The screen lit up, displaying shift schedules, tip distribution charts, POS access logs, and direct links to Everform solutions, all pointing to familiar names. Over the past 6 months, this branch has been operating as a two-tiered system. One tier for the chosen few, the other for the rest of you, those who work the hardest, yet receive the least. He pointed to a chart. Total misdirected tip funds, $87,230. More than 60% of that ended up in the account of Tyler Harper. Approved directly by Brenda Knox. Tyler jumped up. "I just followed the system. I didn't assign the tips to myself." Grayson didn't even look at him. He nodded at Naomi, who played a video. Footage of Tyler entering Lena's POS code from the day before. "I call that theft. And a thief, uniform or not, must be held accountable." Brenda cut in quickly. "We were just following orders from Calvin Drexler. He created this system." Grayson nodded calmly. "Thank you for confirming." He stepped aside, and on the screen appeared Calvin Drexler, regional director, in a secretly recorded internal meeting. Drexel's voice echoed through the speaker, "As long as the branches hit their targets, I don't care how it's done. Just use the temporary or trainee labels, whatever it takes. Just keep the old staff away from the tips." The room felt suffocating. Grayson looked around slowly, each word now like a gavel strike. "Calvin Drexler has been suspended from his position and is under criminal investigation. But right here, right now." He turned to Lena. "I want to thank someone who warned me, even when she didn't know who I really was." Lena stood up. Her eyes shimmered, but she held steady. Grayson continued, "Lena Hartley, you are the reason I came back, and the reason this company hasn't lost its soul." He turned to address the entire staff. "I'm not here to condemn. I'm here to rebuild. As of today, all system access will be restored. All lost tips will be reimbursed, with interest. And anyone involved in system manipulation, whether in this branch or in corporate, will no longer represent Golden Hearth." Lena stared at Grayson, speechless. She wasn't sure what struck her harder. The truth finally exposed, or the fact that the quiet stranger from the bar was now the first person to speak out for what's right. In a system that had long protected what's wrong, and at the far end of the room, Tyler Harper sank into his seat. The murmurs still lingered in the air when the back doors opened and a familiar figure strode in. Dark charcoal suit, crimson tie, a polite smile paired with guarded eyes. Calvin Drexler, regional director, entered the room as though he still controlled it. "Grayson," he greeted smoothly, extending a hand like an old colleague. "I heard there was an impromptu meeting. Good. I think it's time we clear up a few internal misunderstandings. Grayson didn't take his hand. He stepped half a pace back, his gaze like ice. Yes, there are many things to clear up, and all of them involve you. Calvin hesitated, but quickly regained his executive posture. His eyes scanned the room. Naomi Truitt, Lena, Carlos, the rest of the staff watching his every move. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," he said flatly. Naomi stepped forward. The projector flicked to a new slide, this time a summary of data pulled from all 15 branches under Calvin's oversight. Across the top of the screen, in bold, total missing tips, $8,742,906. Below that, withheld wages, manipulated scheduling records, auxiliary staff designation, non-compliant with corporate policy, Everform Solutions, payroll system not approved by the board. Naomi spoke, voice clear and unwavering. All figures have been verified by 3 independent auditors and cross-referenced with bank reports. Every branch under your management used the same scheme, mislabeling employees, manipulating the tip distribution system, and laundering the funds through a fake payroll service, Everform Solutions, owned by you via a shell company in Delaware. Calvin went pale. He turned to Brenda Knox, voice sharp. "I told you not to let this get out of hand." Grayson cut him off, his tone now like steel. "Don't point fingers. This was your system. You ran it deliberately. You didn't just steal money. You stole trust, labor, and the dignity every one of these employees gave to this place." Naomi pressed one final button. The screen lit up with an audio clip, taken from a legally monitored call. "As long as they don't all quit at once, we keep it running. Anyone who complains, cut their hours, shift them out, make them disappear." Calvin's voice, undeniable. Across the room, a few staff clenched their fists. Carlos stood abruptly. "So, it was all true?" Grayson nodded. Then he raised his voice. "I've signed the official suspension of Calvin Drexler from all positions at Golden Hearth Kitchens. His case has been submitted to our legal team and to the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. He is under investigation for fraud, misappropriation of funds, and conspiracy." Calvin exploded. "You have no authority. I made this region profitable. I kept this system alive." Grayson took a step forward, calm but commanding. "Number, you're the reason it's been dying, and I will not let it die any further." The front doors opened. 2 plainclothes officers stepped in. "Mr. Calvin Drexler," one asked, producing an arrest warrant. "You're under arrest for suspicion of abuse of power and financial misconduct." Calvin tried to speak, but the cuffs clicked shut behind him. Everyone watched. Lena stood frozen, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from finally seeing the man behind it all, unmasked. Grayson turned back to the staff. His gaze paused at each face, some tearful, some quietly nodding, some holding hands in solidarity. "I didn't come here to clean house and walk away. I came to begin again. Not with money, with people." He extended his hand to Lena. "And I couldn't do that without you. The one who dared to speak the truth even when you thought you were just speaking to a stranger." Lena looked at his hand. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she reached out and took it. It wasn't the handshake of a CEO and an employee. It was the grip of 2 survivors, 2 people who endured a silent war and just brought down the man who built the trap. The atmosphere at Sage and Ember Bistro the following morning felt like a fresh breeze after a long, violent storm. There were no more whispered fears, No more sidelong glances when someone in management attire walked in. The early shift employees had begun to talk, genuinely like people again, not like survivors trying to dodge bullets. Grayson sat at the corner table, no longer quietly observing, but now seated openly with a stack of files, a laptop, and a cup of coffee freshly brought out by Carlos. "How do you want your coffee?" Carlos asked, voice still rough from long kitchen shifts, but his smile had returned. "However it tastes like a fresh start," Grayson replied. They both chuckled. The distance was gone. In the small meeting room behind the kitchen, the first internal meeting was underway. Lena stood in front of a whiteboard, marker in hand, her eyes shining like someone waking up from a long dream. She wasn't wearing an apron today. She now held a new role, team lead of internal restructuring, temporarily overseeing all floor and kitchen operations. "I know what we've just been through has left everyone drained," she began, "but we have a chance to rewrite how this place runs. And this time, we write it together." A hand went up. It was Taylor Quinn, the employee once dismissed by Brenda Knox for checking her phone at the end of a shift. "Will we have direct access to our tip breakdowns now?" Lena nodded. "Starting this week, the tip distribution system will be synced in real time, displayed both in the break room and on the employee app. Whoever serves gets credit. No more entry on behalf, no more we'll tally it later." Naomi Truitt, still on site to support the transition phase, stepped in with a new framework chart. Golden Hearth is launching a pilot program for role-based tip distribution, including kitchen staff, bussers, and servers. Lena and Carlos will co-design the new model with me. Carlos blinked, caught between confusion and disbelief. "I never thought I'd see my name next to the words strategic planning." "And me," Lena added, "I once thought I'd quit the second I paid off my student loans. But today I want to stay. Not for the paycheck, but because we deserve a better place to work." 3 days later, a new display was mounted in the main lobby, a digital screen showing live tip distribution per shift, the server's name, timestamp, and status of receipt. Next to it, a chalkboard framed in wood, hand-lettered, "This is a place where you don't have to bow to be seen. Just be real." Grayson stood back, arms folded. Beside him, Evelyn Brooks leaned in and whispered, "I've uploaded all the new data to Central. 3 other branches with similar issues are requesting Lena as an advisor." "Let her choose," Grayson said. "I'm not here to hire her. I'm here to trust her." Evelyn nodded. "You're rebuilding a culture, Grayson. But this time, it's not HR writing the slogans. They're writing it themselves." Grayson watched Lena from afar, showing a new hire how to log into the tip system on an iPad. She wasn't above them. She wasn't beneath them. She stood with them. In the back of the kitchen, Carlos placed a hand on the switch and flipped on the new LED lights, a crisp white glow illuminating a space that had long been dimmed by grease and exhaustion. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," Lena replied. Then she turned to Grayson, her voice full of something steady and hopeful. "Old friend, the kitchen's warm again." Grayson smiled. "And this time, no one gets left in the dark." 3 weeks after the historic reversal, Sage and Ember Bistro reopened under the brilliant Sunday morning sun of Los Angeles. The glass doors gleamed. The weathered wooden sign had been replaced, now adorned with flowing script. "Sage and Ember, a place for real people." Customers began arriving early, not just loyal patrons, but restaurant professionals, food bloggers, and journalists, all wanting to witness firsthand how a crumbling restaurant had been rebuilt from within. Inside, the bistro glowed, quiet as a deep breath. The walls had been repainted a warm cream, with raw brick accents left intact for character. Behind the bar hung a large photo, the staff laughing together on restructuring day. In another corner, a digital tip board, updated in real time with every check, visible to all. Lena Hartley stepped out of the kitchen in her new uniform, a pale blue shirt and a grey apron embroidered with a simple line, "Teammate, not subordinate." She approached the corner table where Grayson Pierce was already seated. No laptop this time, no silent evaluation, just a small notebook and an untouched espresso. "Welcome back, old friend," Lena smiled, gently placing the menu in front of him. "This time, you're only allowed to be a guest." Grayson chuckled. "This time, I actually want to taste what a kind place feels like." The air in the cafe was a quiet symphony of freedom. Taylor Quinn, now returned as bartender, moved behind the counter with smooth professionalism and a light-hearted presence. Carlos Navarro in the far kitchen whistled while he cooked, a far cry from the man he was 3 weeks ago. An elderly customer leaned toward Lena and asked softly, "Are you the manager? You look more like a server." Lena grinned. "Here, everyone serves. That's why we're succeeding." Grayson scanned the room. No more cliques, no more corners reserved for the voiceless. Everyone here now knew they were being heard, respected, and had a stake in the future. Evelyn Brooks walked in, carrying a folder and an announcement board. "We've finalized the new tip-sharing model for 5 other locations," she said. "Lena, they're asking for you to train the teams personally." Lena glanced at Grayson, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Grayson nodded. "I'm not here to promote you. I'm here to entrust you." On the far right wall, a chalkboard had been mounted, scrawled in white chalk. "Doing the right thing isn't a grand act. It's how you treat the person standing next to you every day." Lunch wrapped up. Grayson stood, ready to leave. Lena walked him to the door. Before stepping outside, he turned and looked back at her, no longer the old college friend fighting through the kitchen, but now a leader in the truest sense. "You once said this place was a trap." Lena nodded. "And now we've disarmed the trap, the whole system." Grayson squinted, a quiet smile forming. "See you in the next chapter." 6 months after Sage and Ember Bistro was reborn, a major press conference was held at the Los Angeles Convention Center. On the main stage, Grayson Pierce didn't take center seat. He sat off to the side, leaving the spotlight for someone else. At the center stood Lena Hartley, dressed in a light gray suit, hair neatly tied back, her voice clear, her gaze resolute. "We're not here to tell a success story. We're here to talk about what was broken and how we rebuilt it from the ground up." Behind her was the logo of the Phoenix Fund, a non-profit founded by Grayson, now led by Lena as its executive director. To her left stood Carlos Navarro, director of operations, representing the chefs and frontline workers, the ones who used to suffer in silence. The Phoenix Fund wasn't just a symbol. In 6 months, it had implemented transparent tip-sharing systems at 17 locations across the U.S., human-centered leadership training for all regional managers, an anonymous reporting hotline bypassing local management entirely, and most importantly, profit-sharing ownership for frontline employees. When a reporter asked, "What makes you believe employees can lead rather than just follow?" Lena didn't look at a script. She looked straight into the camera. "Because I once believed I had no right. I was so exhausted I only dared to whisper to a stranger that this place is a trap. But that stranger listened and gave me the tools to dismantle it." She paused, then turned toward Grayson, still seated quietly at the edge of the stage. He didn't hand down change. He stepped back. And I learned that when a leader takes one step back, it creates the space for others to step forward. At the end of the conference, Grayson and Lena shook hands in front of the press. A handshake that wasn't ceremonial. It echoed the one they once shared in a college business class. Only now it carried the weight of an entire industry longing for reform. That evening, back at Sage and Ember Bistro, Lena returned just to check on the systems. She walked past the bar and saw Taylor Quinn cracking jokes with a group of customers. Through the kitchen door, she spotted Carlos teaching a new trainee how to make cheese sauce, from instinct, not recipe. Everyone was smiling, genuinely smiling, without supervision, without scoring points. She paused for a moment, then pulled out her phone and texted Grayson. "I once told you not to take a job here." Grayson replied within 3 seconds. "I didn't. I just backed the right person to do the right thing." No one expected that a simple warning, "If you're really looking for a job, don't choose this place," would become the spark that ignited a revolution. Grayson Pierce didn't need a disguise. Lena Hartley didn't need to lead a rebellion. They only needed the right people, at the right moment, and a truth too powerful to stay buried. From a fractured branch in Los Angeles to dozens of locations now changing across the US, this story isn't about a savior CEO. It's about people who had been silenced, finally rising, finally being heard, trusted and empowered. If you've ever stayed quiet because you thought you didn't matter, remember Lena. If you've ever felt exhausted, like the system is too big, remember Grayson. And if you're still standing in that smoky, back-breaking kitchen, know this: hope still lives as long as you don't let go. Because real change always starts with one person who dares to care.